My name is Maciej Pawlikowski. I run digital content unit, visual content studio at Cambridge University Library. I started working on digitization of medieval manuscripts in 2005 and would like to take this opportunity to reflect on this experience and talk about what has and what hasn't changed in the way we approach digitization in photography departments, also called digitization labs. Hopefully, by the end of this presentation, the opening image will not look as controversial as it might seem now. Here you go. I like infographics. This is my cheap take on it. Let's call it technological progress. For a long time, digitization was dependent on the size of the camera sensor. Here's the small image, here's the big image. To make sure we can cover the manuscript page with enough pixels to capture enough detail, we had to make sure that we have a lot of pixels, yeah? And back in 2005, we're using so-called large format scanning bags, which were costing a fortune. They would take one image in 5 minutes, and it would require a person to go and thoroughly check it for artifacts and imperfections, which would take another couple of minutes at least. On a bad day, you end up only with few usable images. The first single-shot medium format camera we had was 49 megapixels and would take split of the second to take an image and another 5 minutes to process it. So to export it, to speed up the processing, we would need to have one more person just to do the exports on the separate machine. And before 2010, there wasn't much of the guidelines for digitization, so a lot of this was common sense. There were a few publications describing best practice and processes, some of which later laid foundation for the subsequent guidelines like Fudgy and Metamorphose. But Fudgy and Metamorphose standards, once they appeared, was they were made and put together in 2010 and 2012, made tremendous improvement to the landscape of digitization across different institutions, which had different resourcing levels. Also helped a lot to highlight the importance of the quality, here are the stars, the quality of archival photography. The different institutions would take different routes depending on their strategy. We started somewhere here, but there are some people who only started digitization programs recently. Some who've been using medium format cameras all the way along, using them for digitization too, never tried horrendous scanning bags. And some never left the SLR zones because that was the only thing they could afford. But even those with tight photography budget can easily meet the standards because they allow for some flexibility and focus on many other aspects of image quality rather than just the size. So there is now a ready process for any archive or library photographer to read on and implement. It also means dealing with a large number of technical details on daily basis. I remember the times when I would be using Excel spreadsheet to calculate the difference between the colors. The characteristics in black on the left hand side are mainly determined by the camera. The characteristics in red are fully determined by the calibration process and photographer's skills. This is another homemade infographic showing how digitization workflows have been automated and improved over the past 2 decades or so. There are 4 basic steps in imaging: calibration, capture, processing, QA, quality assessment. Different institutions have different approach to conservation and handling. For instance, photographing and scanning, in-house digitization, and outsourcing. IT support and software development plays a big role as a lot of automated workflows is realistically tailored rather than off-the-shelf solutions. One problematic area is processing. It is easy when we are dealing with the regular books, but as far as the special collections go, the uneven, irregular pages of manuscripts are difficult to auto-crop. There are, however, cloud-based solutions where images are turned into black and white bitmaps and sent to far overseas countries for someone else to do the job, which cuts the cost, but not the actual workforce. Pre-calibrated hardware, let's say ready to use, not necessarily scanners, might give similar results to photographic camera, but it will also give a fake confidence of being fail-safe. If something goes wrong, you might not see it until many thousands of images later. We were asked in the past to properly redigitize the collections like this, or try to extract more data from old images for digital humanities projects. All heritage imaging standards include one last step, which is the visual assessment. It is very important, can only be done in color-controlled environment with a trained eye. One aspect of digitization we started reflecting on is how the images are used. Should we start differentiation between cheap and quick digitization for access and highest quality digitization for preservation? We put so much effort into developing and following standards, and then something like this happens. It looks great until you start comparing. There is this hole in the parchment which is retouched later on. The next page, surprise, surprise, comes from the same manuscript, but it's clearly bleached to match the layout in red. Here it is. The whole process to photograph the couple of pages for publication involves multiple emails to identify the right content, picture library quotes, curator's assessment, often conservation involvement. By the time you receive your image, few of the library staff had to look at the order. The startup cost of reproducing manuscripts is still resource heavy, hence the dilemma. But even if we do the cheap scans, there is still enough of other work to do. Often overlooked are advanced imaging methods which have been around for some time. They brought a big change to the heritage sector. When using the most basic camera equipment, a lot can be achieved by simply manipulating image, or not simply but manipulating the image to learn more about the project, or about the object itself, just by creative thinking, as photographers often do. Here are a few examples. Simple color masking and exposing of palimpsest underwriting. This was done in Photoshop from regular color images. Hundreds of images to create 20 times magnification of pollen grain collected by Darwin. My colleague Scott built and programmed the camera with microscopic lens attached onto a motorized rail to automatically capture and stitch images and allow for great depth of field in the microscale, which is otherwise physically impossible. Image stitching. To achieve the great detail and accuracy, the largest fabric map with digitize was 4 by 2.5 meters. This one is only 2 by 2. More stitching of 9-inch negatives of aerial photographs. You can see from this 2 patches in the middle that the pilot missed a bit. And finally medieval, a simple lightbox trick to reveal writing in a tiny fold of 4-meter long parchment roll, which appeared to be highly insignificant. Nevertheless, we did it. We helped to answer the research question. There is also this type of specialist imaging which only became available to photographers recently. 10 years ago, it would be mainly heritage scientist domain. All of these are becoming the standard digitization lab activities. It's only a matter of time before more scientific methods will become widely available. Reflectance transformation imaging, which you can see here, can help to see the structure of the texture using raking light. In this example, the spread and shape of the parchment follicles. Multispectral imaging is the new black. We have just acquired the new state-of-art MSI system. A couple of other studios in UK also did. And this is not a map. It's a data from a 3D model of the globe flattened out so we can learn more about cartography of it. And at the end of the day, books are three-dimensional objects, some more than the others. And photogrammetry is now so widely available that you only need your phone to create a decent 3D model. Every glam photographing studio is doing it now, not necessarily with the phone. We also have 2 new special interest groups in UK gathering MSI and 3D photographers. Creative photography is one of the heritage imaging crafts which has not really changed in the past couple of decades. Instead, it would found new ways to appear in media, especially in social media. If anything, creative photography became more available together with the Instagram filters. But did it really? If you have something to show which you regard as unique and extremely valuable, wouldn't you rather call a professional photographer? Besides, we also moved to creating even more exciting content. Check out our library YouTube channel. Sadly, it's quite common for the photographers not being credited. In any industry, not just heritage. Not crediting a photographer's work will cost you nothing. Realistically, all online images are in public domain and can be reused. Heritage institutions have different policies and some of them are very meticulous. Some adopted more generic approaches about crediting their photographers, but in general it hasn't changed much. It's still a bit of a grey area. With this only difference that archival images are also research data. Especially when the larger digitalization projects are concerned, there is a stigma of a heritage photographer being a mechanical and repetitive role. Yes, it is not always extremely exciting, but there is a lot of knowledge, creative process and experience going into creating the content and making sure that your data is valid. The employment landscape is also patchy. The uncertainty of the funding makes us to rely on many temporary staff. In the past 10 years, DCU had 4 to 5 full-time photographers and 12 temporary staff, out of whom only 1 would become permanent. In the past 15 years or so, digitization labs changed a lot. As they naturally kept changing, we are working on constant developments and making sure to provide best possible services. One more change is the digital humanities and specialist training. Many photographers already come equipped with the right skills and commitment to heritage work. The universities are releasing new graduates who can be as well fluent in coding and advanced imaging and passionate about heritage science. The cultural heritage photographer became a separate profession many would value. So before going away, I would like to ask you a few questions. If we don't have opportunity to discuss it, please get in touch. What are the benefits of the newly digitized content you see? What would you bring back from the old ways of imaging? Access or preservation copies? Where do you stand and why? How do you engage with institutions over your research? Thank you very much for inviting me to give a talk. I'm looking forward to the new features of digitization in decades to come, possibly. Also to working with you on the new projects. Thank you very much.